It's definitely a hotly contested subject when it comes down to boot choice. Probably two of the leading brands in Hunter's Choice at the moment would be your Crispies or your Lowas. Well, that's definitely what I seem to see. So I have tried both, and this is just sort of my views on the Crispi versus Lowa. Now, just keep in mind these aren't apples to apples. The Tycam is a more of a high country boot. Definitely a lot more stiffer or rigid through the shank. These are the Crispi Legend, and they're just sort of like an all-terrain mid where they have a lot more flex through the shank. So quite often in hunting, a lot of discussions come down to what brand's better than what brand, and out the gate straight away, these aren't apples to apples, so you'll just sort of have to look at this as objectively, depending on what boot you're going for, what one's going to be better for what you're after. So let's dive in and have a look at these boots. So I think the first thing that you sort of need to look at is the use case with a boot. So what are you going to be doing? You're going to be doing a lot of bush hunting or alpine tops and scree, those sorts of things. That's going to make up a little bit of your decision for you on what boot you decide to choose. For me, it is predominantly alpine, so mostly or pretty much all of my hunting is above the bush line. So I like a high rand on the boot, just to protect it on the scree, and a really good amount of stability through the boot. So you'll see with the Lowa, very little flex in that. So the Crispi has a little bit more, and we'll come to that in a second. So the use case for me is probably the biggest decider when I'm choosing a boot for what I'm going to go with. We'll start talking on the Crispi first. So the Crispi was a test basically after I had ran a set of Lowas prior. I just wanted to test them out. And I guess the benefits that I got from the Crispi, I found that they're probably slightly harder wearing than the Lowa. That I maybe got a little bit more life out of them, not by much, but just a little bit. Potentially a tiny bit wider as well, maybe. I pulled the soles out of both of them and put them together, and you're splitting a hair there, so maybe slightly wider. Again, like I said, these aren't apples to apples boots. The Legend, Nevada Legend, has just a slightly softer shank, whereas the Lowa's a lot stiffer. I did find with the Crispi, it took a little bit longer to wear this boot in than the Lowas. So I think everyone can sort of agree that Lowa comes up trumps with out of the box comfort, and I definitely found that was the case when wearing in the Crispis. They just took a little bit longer to wear in than the Lowas do. I've only done a couple of trips in these, and already they're more comfortable than the Crispis. So yeah, that's probably where a couple of the areas where I found the Crispis lost out. Yeah, so I guess the last set of Lowas I had, I did find that they probably weren't quite as durable. These new ones are actually the Lowa T-Cam or Tycam, which is the exact same as the new Evo GTX that you get from hunting and fishing. These ones are the Torpedo 7 version, which are exactly the same. So it'll be interesting to see the length of life I get out of these, but already they seem like they're pretty tough. And we'll come to some of the things that went wrong on this boot here, or where they broke down for me. Interestingly, I did find that the Crispi felt like it was definitely slightly more waterproof, and I don't know how that works because it's Gore-Tex, so it should be the same amount of waterproof, but these felt more waterproof than my old Lowas, which were the Tibets. However, the new Tycams or T-Cams are pretty bloody good because they're slightly higher, and obviously Gore-Tex is Gore-Tex, so these seem to be stacking up pretty good in that department as well. One of the other really nice features that I do like about the Lowa is the locking systems that it has, with the wee little steel balls, and then the locking or pivoting systems that it has at the ankle joint. and in general, all of the eyelets and everything just feel a little bit stronger and more sturdy than that of the Crispi boots. And especially the wee cross that you do on the front of the boot to lock that tongue in, that's a lot nicer than it is on the Crispi boot as well. So I think ultimately you'll find that a lot of guys are going to have their opinions on what boots are best. I could probably happily flick between both sets of boots. However, I do, for a few reasons, tend to lean towards the Lowa a little bit. One, from the comfort side of things straight away. I had some long walks in the Crispis, and towards the end of that my feet were just not so happy with me, but whereas I know in the past my Lowas have done some big Ks and I've definitely felt quite a lot more comfortable. The locking system I tend to like a little bit more in the Lowas. The Crispi, after sort of like a couple of hours, I needed to redo them up. Crispi probably a little bit more hard wearing than the Lowa. However, they're definitely, because of that like sort of 3/4 shank, the boot does have some flex, and so it has worn out through the front as well. It's also worn out through the heel as well, just because there's a little bit more movement in it. So lean towards the Lowa for future boot selection. However, I wouldn't go past the Crispi boots either. And as I said, everyone's going to have their opinions on what's the best boot, but ultimately I think you need to make sure you go in, try on a few different types. Everyone's foot's going to fit slightly differently. I definitely prefer the most width I possibly can for my feet. And also obviously you're going to have a price point that suits you as well, but this is definitely one of those things you don't skimp on when it comes to spending money around your hunting. With boots, you pay for what you get, and so when you spend a little bit more money, you'll end up finding that you're going to get a little bit more life out of the boot, as well as you'll find that you'll get just a little bit more comfort out of them as well. Another note actually, the Crispis, I found there was no proper, and I could be wrong, there could be something out with them now, but there was no proper care routine with the Crispis, whereas the Lowa has its own quite a good product line for care. So you've got your spray, which you'll spray on, and then there's a cream to go over top of that, and that just seals it on and just makes it a little bit more waterproof as well. And I think a lot of the guys that do complain about the Lowas maybe aren't doing their boot care as well as they could be. I definitely know after every hunt, these get a good wipe down and a spray and a wipe with the cream, just to make sure that that leather is protected as best as possible. So this is probably not that helpful. I think the choice is yours when it comes to a boot. Find one that's comfortable enough for you, that fits your price point, that fits your use case. And just keep in mind, a lot of the guys that are on social media, if they're sponsored by a boot, are going to sell you black and blue that this one's better than the other one. But I think ultimately that's up to every individual to make their own decision on. Cheers.